Okay. So when we left off, you were in Seattle, Grandpa, with 6 kids, and you had just, what? You'd just taken a job in Houston. So what year was that?
Speak.
Well, I'm thinking.
It's okay.
67.
67. So you flew to Houston in...
I went to Houston for a week. And then I went back to Seattle and I picked up the 6 kids. No, I guess my mother. My mother was with the 6 kids, and I went down and rented a house. And
You drove the car down, and your mother flew down with the kids.
Right.
And the dog.
And the dogs.
Her dog.
What dog was it?
Patches. No, Cindy.
Cindy.
And I had 2 dogs. Well, a little later.
You had one at the time. You had Reddy.
You know, we accumulated 3 dogs. When we moved, the neighbors shook their heads.
So when did you meet Grandma?
I met her after I'd been at Boeing about a week, and one day I saw this secretary stroll. She didn't walk; she sort of strolled down the hallway, and my desk was where you could witness the hallway. So she strolled, and she doesn't stroll so much.
That was a southern stroll. But he forgets that I had met him in Seattle, or in Huntsville. He had flown down from Seattle, and he came to Huntsville when I was working there at Boeing, and he came to the Saturn Technical Library, which I was running at the time. And I just remembered his face. I didn't know who he was, but I had met him then. He didn't remember me from then.
That was 5 years earlier.
Right.
That's pretty impressive that you remembered him.
I remembered him.
Mm-hmm.
So you were there to work on Apollo?
Worked on Apollo.
And so Grandma, when did you come to Houston?
When did I go to Houston?
Yeah.
I was there right before he got there. I transferred from Huntsville.
Why?
Because Boeing had just taken a big contract with NASA.
They were just starting up, and
In
they
Houston,
needed people. I was one of the ones that
So a lot
went
of Seattle
down.
people went to Houston, and people in New Orleans went to everyone went to Houston.
So 67, we go to the moon in the summer of 69, so it must have been quite close to going to the moon, right? Like people were thinking that, we're going to go to the moon, right?
No, sure, yeah. Yeah. I I think 3 or 4 of the original 7 astronauts. I sat in one meeting with one of the astronauts, which was sort of interesting. They were all American boys.
He looked a lot like one of the astronauts. I can't remember who he was, but he looked very much like him.
With the crew cut.
And he used to be mistaken for him.
So
frequently.
Terrill and I were in this big, restaurant having dinner, and Dr. Gilruth, who was the head of all of NASA in Houston, walked into the restaurant, and he saw me, and he thought I was the astronaut. There were 7 of them. So he walks over towards our table, and he recognizes this is not the astronaut's wife. So he probably changed his course, and so that was sort of interesting.
When you touch the table, the camera shakes.
It's
So
okay.
don't touch
You
the
need to
table.
relax.
Touch it.
So, Grandma, you came to Houston, and who did you live with?
Who did I work?
Well, who did you live with? Like, did you have your own place?
When I got down there, I first. He was at the Nassau Bay Hotel, and I was at a different hotel at the time. And then my girlfriend Doris, whom I had lived with in Huntsville, Alabama, we both worked for Boeing, so that we lived together again in Houston.
What was the story of your first date where, like, Grandpa bumbled up the road to Doris's house or something like that?
Before you tell that, how did you guys actually meet in Houston?
Well, there was a place in Houston called the Fox and Hound.
No, that wasn't it.
Oh, was the one on
There
the
was
water?
another little bar, a little place where a lot of the Boeing people hung out, and it was in a little town just outside of Houston called Kemah,
On the water.
Kemah, Texas, on the Gulf, and we met there.
And
Yeah, sitting beside this gal, and she puts her hand on my leg.
Is that true?
Oh, she
One of
says-
his favorite lines,
says,
because
"Nice
he was
size."
a runner, was "Feel of my leg." No way.
I can imagine a Boeing engineer saying that. She doesn't sound like
I can't imagine. Sounds like you.
so did you meet before you brought the girls down?
Just before.
So you were only there for a week before you flew back to Seattle? So you met in that first week?
Right, I think so.
Right.
Because I met the kids when he drove down, and then his mother flew down with the kids. And I remember them all coming to the Nassau Bay Hotel. We all used to hang out there. And Reva brought the kids in, and Jackie made the introductions of everybody. She says, "This is my sister Caroline, and Tweesa, Julie, Tweesa, Thuthi. I'm Jackie, and that's Nancy." So anyway,
See, Jackie would have been 5 years old.
she was 5, I think. Nancy was 4.
Before I went to Houston, my Boeing friends used to call my place Miller's Home for Unwed Mothers, because my babysitters were always pregnant before they arrived.
So, Grandma, did you think it was weird that he had 6 kids? Did you know? what
Well,
you were
I already
signing
knew.
up?
He had told me ahead of time. He warned me.
Yeah, with a story like that, you can't hold back. Good story. Real attention getter.
So, how long did you date?
We dated probably about 9 months or so, something like that, before we got married. And his mother was not very happy with the situation, because she sold her home in Oregon and came to Texas, but she really had no experience raising children. So she was in over her head. I think actually she was probably glad when we got married, but she decided to leave town before we got married. She got in her car and drove back to Oregon.
Didn't you feel overwhelmed when you suddenly became the mother to 6 girls? Like, that must have been hard.
You know, I never really thought about it until later. I was 26, but my roommate, Doris, was 12 years older than me, and she had 2 children. And I took care of them a lot. When she had to work, I'd be with her kids, and sometimes she'd have to work late, and I'd go home and feed the kids and help them with, homework and whatever. So I had little experience.
So, you were 26 and Grandpa, you were what, 30?
He was
35.
35.
So, you got married on the 4th of July?
It was supposed to be the 6th of July, which was a Saturday, but right ahead of about a week or so before the wedding, the Justice of the Peace who married us called and said that he was going to be out of town. Could he do it on the 4th? So that's how it happened, on the 4th of July. That was a Thursday.
In Dickinson, Texas.
In Dickinson, Texas. And we flew down to Acapulco for our honeymoon.
How long were you in Acapulco?
A week.
Probably about a week.
What did you do in Acapulco?
We stayed at a place called the Las Brisas, which was kind of a fancy hotel.
All the
And-
guests were given pink Jeeps. So you drive around town and you could see, when you saw a pink Jeep, you knew that they were staying at the what was the name of it? What was the name of the motel?
Las Brisas.
Las Brisas.
And we did quite a lot. We had some wonderful Mexican food, much better than the Mexican food you get in America. And I remember going to Mass on a Sunday, and all of these little Mexican children clustered around the little Jeep. They knew that we were visitors, of course, and they wanted to watch the car, and we thought they meant wash it. I said, doesn't need, no, watch. They wanted to make sure that somebody didn't steal the tires off of it or whatever, so we said okay. So when we came out of Mass, we had to pay everybody. It wasn't just one or two, there were about 10 of them. So we had to pay everybody for watching the car. And then one night we decided to go right into town and get away from all of the tourists. So we went into downtown Acapulco and went into a really seafood restaurant, very, very Mexican seafood restaurant. And as we're sitting at our table waiting for our dinner to come, a fisherman comes in the front door dragging an octopus that he had caught, drug it right through the restaurant, which was kind of an eye-opener. He didn't go in the back door.
Yeah, you knew you weren't in Oregon City.
Did you order the octopus to eat?
No, we had already ordered, thank God.
So when you go ahead.
Well, then right before we left, we had been very careful not to drink the water. Made sure we drank bottled water. And right before we left, the very day that we left, we went out for breakfast before we left on the airplane. And we were in a kind of a fancy hotel restaurant, and I drank some water out of a pitcher. And I was sick for a week after I got home.
Montezuma's revenge.
Yeah.
So you come back, it's 1968, and Grandma, are you still working as a secretary?
I had just quit before we got married.
Okay. You quit to take care of the girls?
Quit to take care of the girls. I figured it was going to be a big job, and I was right. But we weren't there very long when he got a job with TRW in California. So we were only in Houston for about a month after we got married.
Oh.
So we left in August.
So you two only lived in Houston for like a year?
About a year.
About a year. 1 year, 1 month after we were married.
Yeah, so we went to, since he had decided to take this job with TRW, we had to get to San Bernardino and get the kids enrolled in school and whatever before school started in September. So we left right away, and I drove my car with 3 kids, and he drove his car.
How many dogs?
3.
Let's see. At the time, we
Two.
only
Two.
had 2. So I had Kippy, and he had Reddy. That was before Penny. We got Penny in California.
Okay.
So we drove.
Penny belonged to one of my best friends. And the best friend was leaving San Bernardino to go to Seattle.
Going back to
And
Seattle.
His name was Jim Sherman. Jim says, Don, you just got to take Penny. And we were very close friends. So.
As if I didn't have enough on my plate. I had 6 kids and 2 dogs.
I thought he slipped you some money to take Penny.
He did. He gave me $300. I was probably broke.
That's a lot of money to take your dog off your hands.
Yeah, but
Back then, that's a lot, and now it's even more.
he outsmarted me. But Penny was a good dog.
So in August of '68, you go to San Bernardino,
Yes.
and you start working at TRW.
We stayed at the Holiday Inn for about a week with 6 kids and 2 dogs.
Oh my God.
And we found a house. We looked all over and found a house in Rialto, which is just outside of San Bernardino. So,
Tell us about the house, because I know the house was big and interesting.
Let's see. I guess we only had 2 kids in each bedroom.
right.
It had a sort of a California plants were all new.
Yeah,
to
it was a
me.
kind of a cactus garden out
And
front.
the owner wanted to be sure that I understood that I was not supposed to take care of the garden, the yard.
They came every weekend, and he and his son took care of the yard. Wanted to make sure it was done right. I think they had reservations about it renting to us, but they did. And we lived there for 9 months. And we kept making trips up to the mountains, the Crestline area. He had a friend, Don Clausen, who lived in Crestline. So we started looking around for a place to rent up there. Found this 3-story house with 7 bedrooms, 2
That's
bathrooms, 2 kitchens.
But the kids spent 1 full year in school
Right.
before we went up the hill.
Is that when you met Clausen or no?
Well, I knew Clausen before I went to San Bernardino.
When did you meet Clausen?
I met him
Seattle, Boeing.
in Boeing, Seattle.
And so he also moved to TRW or no?
Yeah.
He was already in
He was
Crestline.
already at TRW. He left Boeing and went to TRW.
So how long were you in Crestline?
3 years.
How long was the commute to TRW?
15 miles from, and we lived at 5,000 feet. So I had to, San Bernardino was 1,000 feet. So there's a 4,000 foot change in elevation.
So what did you do after Crestline?
After Crestline,
Yeah.
well, that's when you decided you left TRW.
Yeah,
Went back to Boeing.
I went back to Boeing and let's see.
What year?
Let's see.
Probably 72.
72.
I think it was 72.
So you moved back to Seattle.
I found a house on the lake.
I found the house on the lake. We drove 2 cars. When we left Crestline, I had 3 kids and he had 3 kids, and then we'd swap on the way up, kids and dogs. And we had little walkie-talkies that we could talk to each other on the road. That was way before cell phones. So then we'd meet somewhere, whoever arrived first, we'd decide where we were going to eat. So all 6 of us, 6 of the kids would get together and we'd...
The house that I found in Seattle was a pretty nice place on a lake, on Lake Sammamish. And,
Well, he says he found it, but he didn't. I found it.
The problem was
we dropped the
there was-
kids off at your grandmother's here.
Yeah. The problem was there weren't enough bedrooms, but it had a full basement, bare concrete floor, and it was big. So I promptly put up petitions and made, I don't know,
Big
three
bedrooms,
more
yeah.
bedrooms downstairs. So I told the kids that if you don't kick the walls, or they'll come down. So they didn't.
But it was right on the lake. We had a dock off
Wow.
the backyard, so it was great. It worked out well.
How many, did you buy it?
No,
No, we were leasing.
leased it.
What was the lake?
Lake Sammamish. We had 200 foot of frontage on Lake Sammamish.
How come you didn't buy a house?
Well, that's a good question. But
Didn't have any money.
yeah, you know,
That's
but
a good answer. He had no money at the
I
time.
think that house was probably
They actually, before we left there, they offered to sell it to us, and I wish that we had bought it, but we really couldn't. I mean, the kids are growing up, and kids are, possibly getting ready to go to college, and it was just impossible. But
So we bought a house about 2 miles away in Issaquah.
Back up for 1 second.
Okay.
How long did you live in the house on the lake? How many years?
One.
on the lake, oh man, I have to think
Longer.
about that. No, I think longer than that.
We bought the house in 75. So 2.5 years, approximately. We moved to Issaquah in the house.
We moved in 72. So
Julianne was a senior in high school.
Did Carolyn go to
Carolyn.
college?
Carolyn went to the Bellevue Community College.
Was she living at home?
Well,
Yep.
she went to Washington State first and came,
Yeah, but only for
and came back
right, short-lived.
one semester, I think. She came back.
So you
And
lived,
then Julie went to Washington State.
so you lived in the house on the lake for 2.5 ish years.
Something like that.
And then you bought the house. in
Bought the
Issaquah.
house in Issaquah.
Right.
In 75.
in
845 Highwood Drive, Issaquah. So the kids all went to school there. Yeah.
What were the other girls doing at this time? Some of them were living with you and some of them weren't.
I think Carolyn she was at Washington State, I believe. Julianne was getting ready to go to Washington State. And the rest of the kids were in high school. Susie and Jackie and Nancy, the younger three.
They were the
Right.
track team, the three of them.
So, how long did you stay at Issaquah?
Let's see. Can't remember exactly. When did we move onto the boat? Probably 10 years. I think about 10 years.
We bought the boat in 85.
Okay, hold on. Let's back up. How did this idea of the boat even enter your mind?
His
Boeing,
secretary
the
at work.
secretary started talking about boats.
Okay.
And so I'm listening to this, and so the next thing, we were looking at boats.
His secretary was going to buy a power boat,
Right.
but he decided he wanted a
Yeah,
sailboat.
well, you looked at power boats for one day, and then we decided sailboats looked more exciting, so we looked at sailboats.
So, what year is this? Like, how long did it take you to get the boat? It must have taken some time.
About a year.
So did you spend any time on the sailboat?
We rented one for a weekend, a long weekend.
And I invited several of my friends and their wives, and we went to, we sailed to Port Townsend. Oh, no, what was it? Port Townsend? No,
Port Ludlow.
Port Ludlow.
Port Ludlow.
Spent the weekend up there.
Spent the weekend up there, came back and decided that's what we were going to do, so we did.
Okay, so
And I think you had come on the scene and you went with us boat shopping. I don't know, you probably don't remember much of that.
Wait a minute. So you find the boat. When do you have the idea to get the boat? What year?
Probably 84.
So in February of '84, when I'm born, you guys have already decided to buy the boat.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
we've
we
already-
had
we
decided
already
we
bought
were,
the boat.
yeah, I guess so. We'd
Yeah.
already
It
bought
was
it.
on order. It was being built.
So you made plans with Jack Chen, and
Sent him 10 grand.
how did you find Jack Chen?
How did we find Jack Chen?
Through the old guy that we were looking at boats.
Oh,
And this old guy and his wife, who lived in Vancouver, were looking for boats too, and we happened to run into them. And he said that he told us about the Vagabond, and he was thinking of getting one. And so we made arrangements with Jack Chen to meet us. He was coming to the United States, and we met him in Vancouver. As a matter of fact, you were there. So we're getting
Yeah.
our
You
our,
were about,
our,
I don't know, you were a couple years old.
yeah, we're getting our timing a little mixed up because you were like 16 months old.
Okay,
At the
so
time.
you must not have ordered the boat until after I
Right,
was born.
after you were born.
But you were thinking about it. And
We were
working on
thinking
it.
about it and working on it.
So how come after only spending a weekend on a boat did you guys decide you want to live
Well, he
on
was
a boat?
listening to this secretary at work, and she was going to do it, and she was retiring, and they were going to live on a boat, and he
I mean, this
decided
was not well thought out. This was
it was not a well.
typical.
Alright, so you guys are like, we're gonna sell the house and live on the boat.
Yep.
We rented a boat for a weekend once.
Yeah.
You spent the night on, yeah.
Yeah. That's when you decided you were going to do it. Everything was great and wonderful.
And Grandma, you didn't have any reservations about the small kitchen or the...
I really didn't, and when we finally did get the boat, it was amazing how I feel like I adapted to it easily. Because we had the upper deck, out on the cockpit and everything, and it didn't ever seem like we were really crowded.
Well, the boat was
It was pretty big, a lot
it
of
was
storage.
big, and it was particularly the cabinet work. The inside of the boat was pretty plush.
But
But
was,
And so it was a pretty pleasant place to be, even though space is limited. But
So why did you decide to have the boat in Rainier Beach?
it was close to Boeing.
Rainier Beach was a pretty rough neighborhood, right?
Well, except living on the boat, we had a 6-foot cyclone fence.
Well, it wasn't really easy to
separated
find a
it
place. We
from
had
all the
looked.
riffraff.
I mean, a lot of it. We thought about going to Des Moines, which is south of Seattle, and they had a waiting list of like 5 years. So we had to have a place to put the boat.
The cyclone fence solved the problem, but it was sort of standard to hear gunshot across the street in the housing project weekends.
I remember you saw a stabbing once.
Yeah, in front of a 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven store.
Well, it was with a broken bottle.
Yeah, the guy had a wine bottle and he broke it on the concrete, and he went after this guy with just broken glass.
So-
Remember, I was
So
standing
he
there.
called. You called the police,
Yeah, I
and I
called
think
them.
the owner called the police. And
Yeah, that was.
then they called him, and he had to go to court to testify against this guy. And then right before he was supposed to go to court to testify, they called and said it was canceled because he was already in prison. They had already gotten him for something else,
Yeah, there's
so he
some-
never had to go,
some bad
which I was
asses
glad.
So you didn't get to go out of the fence and play with the kids in the neighborhood, Christopher.
was
But
it
those were some good days. You went to school there at Amazing Grace, and remember Mon Echo and Philip and all your friends, Thomas.
was it a lot of work to have Christopher? Like, you guys were not young anymore.
How old were you when you got me?
Oh man, I don't know. Let's see. It was in 85, I guess we got you. So I was getting up there. I was too old to be doing what I was doing. 40 or something like that.
And you were 50, Grandpa?
Under 50.
So
I think you were 53 based on math.
Maybe.
And so Grandma would have been in her early 40s.
Right.
Which is old to have a new baby, but not too old to be raising children.
Not after you've already raised 6.
But he must have not been very much work compared to having 6.
He wasn't.
He really wasn't. He was a good baby.
He only
He was
fell.
throwing diapers.
He only
when I got
fell in the lake, I think, twice. One
No,
time,
once.
the
once.
young guy that lived next
Once.
door. What was his name? The young kid that lived next door.
Scott.
Scott. He dove in.
We were standing on the dock talking to Scott, and I turned around for a few minutes, and you're in the water, and Scott's jumping in and pull you out. That was the only time.